in our first class, we had a movie that would smidge into like 11:50, right? Like we did not interrupt their class at all, but we were over like our class for like a minute or two, right? And the lady she was very nice, by the way. I'm about to tell what seems like an unflattering story, but it's very nice. But she comes in, she was absolutely flustered, like trying to get everything. I'm like, oh, I'm really sorry, it's pretty. But literally every day, that second chorus class, our class it's supposed to start at noon, and we're waiting for them to leave to like 12, like 2 or 3 or whatever. And I'm like, I feel like I give her the grace. Just do like the song from Red. Just bust out something. Just bust out memory from Cats for no reason. Don't make it anything that has any relevance. Press is a word that I don't think would apply. I get your point. I get your point. Did you?
It wasn't that high. It wasn't very high.
I have never had it.
Just so you know, the mic is hot now.
Okay.
People can hear you.
All right.
Oh. Yo, it's a weird way. It's such a weird way to push on someone. It's like, you need to get out, you need to do more. Go sing unaccompanied by music. Like, can I do public speaking? How's it going? Yeah.
It's 24. That means
And you're like, oh, one person show, all of you. That's great. I love it. Oh, it's not going anywhere. It's all locked in. It's the vault. That's it. Random places like so good. The first I didn't even show up in the Jacob Market.
Good morning. I am Amelia Bond, one of the editors at the Wake Review, a text literary magazine and student club. The mission of the Wake Review is to provide a creative outlet for the college, and as we believe, Wake Tech should always be a place for its creative voice. We hope those in attendance at this wonderful event today will consider supporting the magazine by attending our issue update next month, and consider submitting a name for next year. Today's visiting author event has been sponsored by the English department, and a big thanks to the department's visiting author committee for their time and effort in putting it together. It is with great pleasure that we welcome you today to the reading by North Carolina native and esteemed New York Times bestselling novelist, Wilton Barnhardt. With a literary career spanning decades, Barnhardt has captivated readers with his unique narrative style and profound storytelling. Wilton Barnhardt's journey in the literary world began with the publication of his debut novel, Emma Who Saved My Life, which quickly garnered critical acclaim and established him as a writer to watch. His subsequent novels, including Gospel and Look Away, Look Away, further solidified his reputation as a masterful storyteller, blending humor, wit, and a keen observation of contemporary society and big picture. Today, we have the privilege of delving into the enthralling world of Wilton Barnhardt's latest novel, Western Alliances, now available at bookstores everywhere. Lovers of HBO's Succession will immediately be drawn to this rollicking and hilarious portrait of the adult children of a dysfunctional citing as the turmoil of the 2008 Wall Street collapse, Western Alliances is a captivating and ultimately touching novel that takes readers across Europe with its charming and romantically adventurous protagonist, Wilton Barnhardt. In Western Alliances, Barnhardt demonstrates himself to be ahead of his literary powers as he presents an irresistibly engaging saga that explores important themes of privilege, connection, and the obligations we have to one another. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to a true literary movement, Wilton Barnhardt.
Thanks so much. I went to Michigan State University and we had the Red Cedar Review, and I flooded the Red Cedar Review with every story, poem, novella, beginning of a novel, and I did. I actually that was my first place I got published, so it's something you should do. So thank you, Amelia. As you said, the year of this book is 2008. Now, y'all were toddlers if you were born at all, and the bottom of the country fell out. I mean, the economic system just collapsed. And when the dust cleared, it was obvious people were just idiots, and that people were up to all kinds of mischief. Now, one of the main characters in this novel is the father who has been, after they've gone down the boardroom trying to find someone who could be president of this investment banking firm, they land on Salvador Costa. He's a Portuguese-American, formerly working class guy from Providence, Rhode Island. And I'm going to read you a section of what went wrong with the company, and you're not going to understand a lot of the words, and that's because nobody understands any of these terms or words, including the people who were making billion-dollar judgments with these things. In June of 2007, Richard Culp, the CEO of Hightower Wiggins, told the board that 3 subprime hedge funds were at zero, the panacea of collateralized debt obligations that heralded salvation of Hightower Wiggins that the old fuddy-duds like Salvador Costa couldn't get their heads around. Well, they were approaching worthlessness. Culp explained that one Cayman Islands-based SPE, a special purpose entity, a satellite limited partnership that issues securities back to the mothership, had sold securities that were not only unsound, the tranches of mortgage-backed securities rated from super senior to dog poop residual had every last one of them lost their value. But also, Culp said, now that we're mentioning it, another SPE set up on Tortola in the British Virgin Islands had sold Hightower Wiggins additional collateralized debt obligations that were an elaborate second investment banking on the blazing success of the first investment. This was known as a CDO squared. Culp resigns, Sal narrated to his son, a one-man band of bad swaps. Havner goes next, then Dudley resigns, then Franklin Martin. What did I always say about Franklin Martin? You said he was a buffoon for the ages, Dad. That buffoon for the ages resigns. The CFO, Morris Maynard, was asked to step down, as were the senior executives who had leveraged Hightower Wiggins at a scarcely credible 29-1. Meaning for every $29 billion risked in these worthless on-their-face subprimes, only $1 billion was held back as collateral. The accounting officer who covered up the disaster, even from the board, stepped down. Well, not stepped down. These gentlemen leapt from the turn of the 20th century building on William Street, launching from the spires and gargoyles of the 17th floor, floating gently to the sidewalk with their golden parachutes, with sapphires on top and a diamond trim, severance packages and lavish payouts, and as their contracts specified, reimbursement of their losses, which took priority over the investors' losses. Use of the corporate jet was cut off, naturally, but the car and driver would be kept for a suitable transition period, a calendar year. There was a raid on collateral. Some 1.15 billion needed to be dispersed to calm the panicked investors. Of course, the suckers weren't offered actual money, but other financial instruments, like some more CDOs that were lying around, real and synthetic, and a showcase of fiduciary, flimsy, semi-illegal, and possibly made up on the spot financial vehicles, pooled viatical settlement funds, foreign bank-backed promissory notes, securities composed of swaps of all varieties, mortgage swaps, interest swaps, credit swaps, money in a brown paper bag swaps, tied to forward rate agreements and insured by financial insurance firms that were chartered the week before and staffed by nebulous, mysterious entities who, having insured this mess, offered additional securities that made money if they themselves defaulted, which the top executives of Hightower Wiggins also bought for their portfolios. Salvador Costa asked his son, was this on paper $1.15 billion wrenched from the collateral holdings of Hightower Wiggins, Bobby? What do you think? I'm going to guess no, Dad. Correct. They borrowed it. Of course it was borrowed. The firm just wasn't leveraged enough, apparently. The billion was advanced on a transfer of $100 million, courtesy of some bank called Bahrain Capital Limited, which hadn't been in existence 3 months before. The credit rating of the firm went from AA to A. Geez, how was it even an A? Sal wondered aloud. The major hedge funds at Bear Stearns collapsed the next month. Lehman Brothers shut down its mortgage lender. Citigroup headed toward a loss of $5 billion on the quarter. Merrill Lynch posted a nearly $2 billion loss. So that's the situation the Costa family finds themselves in. If you think the whole book is full of those kind of financial things, don't worry, that's it. That's the only financial section. And every single one of those things was done. I didn't make anything up. I got in the Wall Street Journal and read books about what the investors were doing, and it was madness. So Sal Costa is in Europe. He's in Frankfurt to check with the European Central Bank, and he calls his children. His children began as nice middle-class kids, but they have been spoiled, rotten, as their father got richer and richer and richer. They have trust funds, and now they just gallivant all over Europe. Must be nice. The sister Rachel lives in Paris, and Bobby and his backpack, Roberto, go all over wherever he wants. So he's called them to join him at the Frankfurt train station so he can tell them about the financial realities that are ahead of them. And who's left out of this is, of course, their mother, Madalena. Madalena walked out on the husband right before he got rich, and she's never forgiven herself for that. She's constantly tried to sue and get new alimony, even though she went and married another man. I mean, she's wasted a lot of money in courts. And so she shows up, even though she was not invited. Let's see if I can find where to start here. They're in the middle of their discussion, the father, the son and daughter, when Madalena comes in. This is in a coffee shop outside, within the dome of a train station. There was a lab-coated doctor by her side out of central casting, fatherly, wise, supervising the progress of a motorized medical transport chair, painted white with a Red Cross decal. The Germans could not help but stare at Lena. Lena wore a shimmery turquoise gown with a golden silk turban. It was an entrance worthy of a silent film star. Oil black eyeliner, blue mascara about which Nefertiti might have gone too much, on aggrieved eyes that looked out accusingly over the face mask. The medical attendant strolled beside her with an IV tree, with a clear tube leading to some portal amid the folds of her gown. It wasn't attached, of course. Lena was too lazy to fully commit to her imposture. There was some EKG-like device beeping and whirring away. After the attendant goes away and she sits down, Salvador begins. Lena, said Salvador with faint warmth. "There was no need to convey yourself in from your bed of pain. They must be missing you back at the hospice." "Don't tease us, Mother," Rachel said, having us fantasize about the cozy warmth of your deathbed. Roberto raised an eyebrow. "Who is this get-up for, Mom?" "Oh, Bobby, you know train stations. They have these CCTV cameras everywhere, recording my every goddamn move." Lena had three main pretend charities: the restoration of a Providence mansion, the Hezekiah Williams house, for which $1 million had been raised without any trace of improvement in the property. Then there was the Roma Holocaust Memorial Project, which had led to a several-year pretense that, after all, I've got gypsy blood, arguable at least in anyone Portuguese-American, and that was useful in guilting her acquaintances out of small checks that had to date not gone to any substantive memorial for the Romani genocide. Perhaps she would have had more success in her fundraising if she could have stopped herself from calling the Roma gypsies at every turn. And then her miracle cure scams. During her tour of German spa towns and health clinics, she constructed her most recent persona, the dying Lena, sick with a mystery illness that was badly understood by doctors. But it was so common, more common than realized. Constanza, that was her middle name, the Constanza syndrome, she called it. It's unsearchable on all databases. Peddling a mystery illness to cranky old European women who felt they were long suffering from something or other turned up some of her greatest profits. But alas, as of last year, a federal audit plus a class action lawsuit from American donors plus an investigation from the U.S. Attorney from the District of Rhode Island had slowed down the intake of money. "I gotta appear sick," she explained, sitting at their table. "The attorney has his spies everywhere, waiting to catch me dancing a jig. Well, I'm genuinely sick. I do have Constanza syndrome. It just happens to be in remission." Roberto began, "What precisely is?" and his sister interrupts him. "Oh, God, Bobby, why would you even ask?" "Oh, just wait till you get it, Pumpkin," their mother said, not really up for a battle. "It runs in families." No one could or would say anything for a moment, so Lena carried on. "Speaking of family, if this is a family meeting and I should attend, because like it or not, I'm family." Sal said, "You were family." "If what you have to say involves my children, how wouldn't it involve me?" Rachel broke her biscotto in half, saying without passion, "Since when were you remotely interested in our lives? Pumpkin, you shouldn't be so jaded at such a young age." She smoothed out her spectacular gown, which was, as she had hoped, still turning heads of every businessman who walked by. Was she a countess, a soprano singing tonight at the Alta Opera? "It is I," she said, through a sigh, "who should be offended." And that spurred a triplicate of groans. "Lena, you may listen, despite none of it concerning you," said Sal. "Now, Hightower Wiggins, as you children may be dimly aware, I have no idea if you read a word about your native country in the papers. It's in trouble. Stupid decisions were made, cover-ups have been attempted, money's being quietly transferred hither, thither, and yon. The SEC, oh, Maluco that I am. I don't know why I even ask, but can either of my children venture a guess at what SEC stands for?" "I'm sorry," said Rachel. What does what stand for?" "SEC," said Roberto. "It's a banking thing, right? Security and economic control," Rachel guessed. Sal offered a flat smile. "The Securities and Exchange Commission. They investigate financial shenanigans." "Obviously not very thoroughly," Madalena said, "or the continuous Ponzi scheme of Wall Street wouldn't be one flush away from the East River." "The SEC," Sal continued, "has frozen all liquid assets of Hightower Wiggins, and that's all of them, to keep the more disreputable among my colleagues from accessing $10 million liquidity accounts and stiffing investors. Now, since I can't raise you kids by phone or email, Daddy," Rachel said pleasantly, "half of what you send out is that unreadable newsletter." Roberto, "It's not exactly unreadable, Dad, but..." "Oh, shut up," said Rachel. "Stop sucking up, Bobby. You don't read it either." "Yeah, but I don't hit delete the second I see it like you do." Salvador Costa leaned back in his chair as if to observe them from a distance, his countenance stern. Soon they trailed off, aware of their father's silence. "Sal," said their mother, wanting to be on someone's side, "don't be mad at the children for not reading your gobbledygook newsletter." "It has," Sal said in a small voice, "a subscriber rate of over 4 million. Folks pay $280 for a 2-year subscription. Don't you worry your head there, Lena. I'll have plenty of money if Hightower Wiggins goes bye-bye." A number of people in the global economic bond community hang on its every word. Now, along with the newsletter I sent you were other more vital attachments, pertinent to your situation. "We have a situation?" Rachel wondered. "A situation?" Robert echoed. Madalena joined in. "What kind of situation, Sal? Don't be mysterious. I mean, do I have a situation too, or is it just the children?" Sal folded his hands on his small belly. "Have you kids begun a portfolio as I suggested?" Silence. "Along the lines of the plans I laid out in the..." Rachel, did you not see what Miss Santos sent you 2 months ago?" "If I delete you on site, Daddy, why on earth would I read something from your assistant, Mrs. Santos?" "I laid out some very painless investments, all available in the online, self-regulating accounts I set up for you." "Oh, sweet Jesus, have you even been to the site since I set it up?" Roberto looked at the train station floor. "I forgot the password," Rachel brought out. "Well, as for your money, and of course, again, I'm beginning to suspect the answers to these questions before I even ask. But did you open accounts in the foreign banks I recommended so there could be an avenue through which you could continue to draw money?" Roberto did remember seeing an email about that, and it sounded like a good idea. To circulate his money in the wider world beyond Hightower Wiggins' checking account, the single ATM card, and associated credit card, which functioned everywhere as he traveled the continent, but he had not done it. "I've got bank accounts," Madalena said, "in 3 countries. The only sensible thing, Sal, was to deposit any money you intend for the kids with me, and I will distribute it in such a way that no regulator can know what's happening." Rachel snapped to her old self. "Mom, I wouldn't let you look at a photo of my money, let alone hold it for safekeeping." "Bobby," his mother pleaded, "I haven't trusted you, Mom, since you said we were going to the Salem Maritime Museum as a special treat, and you dropped me off at Brockton Academy for boarding school with a suitcase. I thought I was going to be a day student." "So, children," Sal asserted, "you don't have other accounts and savings in a variety of dependable banks, the ones Miss Santos wrote to you about?" Silence. "What on earth have you done with your savings? You have trusts generating $120,000 each year, which even you guys can't spend down every little cent." Rachel sighed. "Oh, Dad, I do spend every cent of it. Paris is pricey. Indeed, I've been sort of strapped lately. What about you, Bobby? Mr. Backpack and youth hostels, you can't possibly be spending $120K. "No, Dad, don't." Rachel glared at him in big sister disgust. Roberto said, "I guess it's just sitting in the current account, not getting spent." Sal frowned at hearing his son call a checking account a current account. Someone has been in Europe for too long. "That money, son, makes what? 0.05% interest. You could have had thousands of dollars extra. A weekend at the Ritz in Paris off the interest you could be making with that money. If you just made the dimmest of investments. Good God, what is the point in talking to you guys?" Mother adjusted her turban. "They're just awful children, really they are, Sal. The only solution is for me to dispense the money to them, but only if they deserve it, Sal. $120,000, my God. Why, it's just shameful. I have no idea my children, who tell me regularly they can't contribute a dime to their poor old mother in her illness. All this time we're living like Jackie Onassis and Scorpios." "Stop babbling, Lena." Salvador Costa put his briefcase on the table and opened it. He produced 2 envelopes, and from the 2 envelopes removed what looked to be money orders. Rachel looked at the rectangular pieces of paper longingly. She attempted a smile, hoping to sway the father she used to have wrapped around her finger. Roberto expected the worst. that whatever money their father had prepared for them would have to wait until they had jumped through the hoops that his assistant, Mrs. Santos, had held aloft for them. These, Sal began in a fearsome voice in its intensity, were for you to deposit in your happily waiting, long-established alternate accounts, money that could in no way be traced back to Hightower Wiggins and could be yours, free and clear. But what I am now hearing is that you spoiled brats have only your checking accounts and ATM cards through Hightower Wiggins, accounts you can neither access nor, if you could access them, withdraw from. Sweet Jesus, what kind of international ATM fees do you kids rack up in a year? It almost makes for someone's monthly salary. He sipped from his coffee and then dabbed his forehead with the napkin. He became calmer. You may have noticed you can't withdraw money with your ATM cards, or if you haven't noticed it, you soon will. Rachel, still trying to look light and charming, began, well, Dad, you could, I could what? What could I do, Rachel? Bobby, what do you think I should do with these teller's checks, which now can't be deposited? Roberto stirred uneasily in his cold metal cafe seat. I guess we could take those checks and open a new account today with it at, say, Dresdner Bank. Roberto feebly pointed to a bank kiosk in the train station within view, or Deutsche Bank. You won't be doing any banking business on a Saturday in Germany. I don't think you could open an account in Germany anyway. With this sort of teller's check, you need a wire transfer that showed the trustworthy source of the money. Plus, you need a German address. But I live in, Paris, Rachel said. Never had a declaration of living in Paris sounded so desperate. Madalena's color had returned to her face. She must have thought victory was as close as it had been in years. Of course, I have a German address, children, in Cologne. My accounts in Milan and Guernsey would also work. I could deposit both orders into my passbook account. And then Sal tore up the checks. Rachel gasped. Roberto stared in horror. Madalena looked like she might faint. Salvador Costa stood up, slammed his briefcase shut, and looked at his watch. It seemed Sal Costa might walk away with no further explanation, but he turned and concluded, I have failed to make you guys decent, functional adults. I think I did a pretty good job raising you as kids, giving you to all that you could need or want, even with your mother walking out on us. Madalena began to protest, but she cut short her self-defense after meeting the eyes of her ex-husband. You children, Sal went on, have become the worst kind of American rich kid flotsam. Not even responsible enough to read a few emails, devote a few hours to protecting your money. Do you somehow think money is just always there on a countertop? Cyprus, Argentina, I saw money collapse there for myself. The ruble tanked under Tsar Nicholas, $250 billion in today's dollars, wiped out in a week, and looky, there comes linen. Hell, right in this very city, several generations ago, where you're sitting, the most powerful currency of Europe once upon a time was being exchanged at 4.2 quadrillion Deutschmark to the dollar in the Weimar Republic. Money can disappear. He snapped his fingers, and dramatically it seemed loud enough to be heard across the entire Hauptbahnhof. Like that. Everything I encouraged you to do in those newsletters, oh, Sal, not the newsletters again, mumbled their mother, and emails was to increase the odds that you just might keep afloat in a crisis in which the suspicions began to dawn, kids, that there is some 40-some, 50-some trillion dollars out there in bad paper. Much of it sold by Lehman and Bear Stearns and Merrill and Hightower Wiggins, and you could not even do me the courtesy of reading my warnings. And the joke is, the person you did the least courtesy to was yourselves. If Hightower Wiggins ceases to exist in a few weeks and the shares of the company aren't there to feed your trusts, what happens to you layabouts, Rachel stood too. Okay, Dad, what do we do? I'll be all right, Dad, Roberto said. There are a million couches I can bum on. Salvador Costa turned and began to make his way through the crowd to the Zurich train. Roberto knew that his father hated this. He hated all episodes of discipline or tough love when they were growing up. Well, we better go after him, Rachel said. Their mother sighed, looking up at the pigeons squabbling in the great girder arches. Well, it's never worked for me, begging and lowering myself. How do you imagine, Mother, Rachel said automatically, you could possibly find a lower plane to exist upon? No, don't run after him, said Roberto. Among other things, he didn't want to put on more of a show. Bobby, the worthless son, who has to be paid off so he can go away and play with his mountain of money and keep out of Daddy's hair while Daddy saves the financial institutions of the Western Alliance. Stop there. So that's the book. These kids now, with no money, have to keep up their dreams of bumming around Europe and seeing every castle and museum and cathedral. And of course, they have no money, so they basically go and mooch off old boyfriends, girlfriends. And everywhere they go, they cause disaster. I mean, Roberto, handsome fella, he has managed to have quite a number of girlfriends and boyfriends, for that matter. And everywhere he goes, he manages to wreck marriages and mess things up. So it's comic, but eventually the money does start running out. And those companies, if you were in a family where your dad worked for Bear Stearns or Lehman Brothers, you went to zero. You lost it all. And so that's what inspired the book. What becomes of these poor kids? It dawns on them eventually, damn, I'm going to have to go home and get a job, which they end up doing. But anyway, I won't give everything away. There's a lot of disasters and comically wrecked lives before they get there. I guess I could take some questions if there are any. I'll tell you about the book that this is great fun. Well, there are not that many, I think, great perks to being a writer, because you're at home all the time typing, and everyone else is having fun, and it's nice out, and you're inside. And then the book comes out, and no one cares, or someone pans you, and there's some bad. But I'll tell you what's good. What's good is that this book is set in 16 different countries all over Europe. And I have written off travel expenses for 16 different countries over several years. So that's the great thing about being a writer, is you say, I think I need a Paris chapter. I think these family needs to go to Hawaii on a trip. And then you go do that and then claim it against your taxes. So that's the good part. Anyway, 16 different countries. And I put the copy editor through hell, because there's all those weird letters. There's the Scandinavian O with the line through it, and there's the Portuguese A with the tilde on top, and the S, the double S thing that the Germans had. Anyway, they had to go find those keys somewhere. We didn't get it all right. I've since found a few mistakes, but maybe, I don't know, maybe they'll clean them up at some point. So, are there, yes? It's funny, this was optioned for about 6 months, and here's the thing is how options work. All of my books, except one, have been optioned. And I get to fly out to Hollywood, and everybody makes over me, you're a genius, you're the best. We've never read a book like this. We've never read before until we read your book. We love you, there's so much love going out, and love coming. Okay, it's so BS. And so you take the check and you go home, they're not going to make it. They're not going to do anything. They buy like 23, I think it's 1 in 23. They buy 23 books for every one that goes forward into production. And of that, maybe a handful, maybe 1 in 10, actually go from production to being a film. But I'm not going to discourage them from their follies. If they want to give me money, in fact, you often make more money on the options than you did on the book. If they want to do that, that's fine with me. And of course, every time I say, hey, I know who should write the pilot episode. I know who should write this script. And they perk up eagerly. Who? And I say, me. And they go, oh, I don't know. Why don't we go with a professional? So, well, I was professional enough to write the book that you were loving and saying I was a genius about. So Yeah, I mean, it's a very hard leap to make. And of course, you know, the average book advance in this country is probably somewhere between $8,000 and $10,000. You're sort of doing it because it's your hobby. You know, let's not pretend. If you're Stephen King, you're making money, but the rest of us are down in sort of middle class land. And it's just a nice thing to have in addition to your salary. But when you talk in Hollywood, now the money's getting serious. Nobody's making anything for under 50 million or whatever. And you just pray that they get to the point where they make it, because the writer, first of all, I always, if you ever sell your book to Hollywood, you should ask to be executive producer, because you really get a chunk if you do that. You might get 5% of the budget on the first day of filming. You can work out what 5% of 50 million would be, you know. So, I mean, that's where the money is, and they just don't want to lose it. So they're not letting me write the script. But one of these days, they'll get desperate and they'll maybe let me do one of them. I did write the script for my first novel, and I even sold it as my script, and we even got to the read-through stage with actors and actresses. And I thought, oh boy, here we go. Then COVID, and it all fell apart. Such is the business. Any other? That's a good question. Any other? Yeah.
So, how did you sort of make the transition from journalist to novelist, and what kind of writing do you enjoy more?
I can answer this question. You know, I was at Sports Illustrated magazine. I was one of the youngest reporters there. Me and Austin Murphy were the sole 23-year-olds. And the reason I could make that transition to being a novelist is I always wanted to write a novel, and I had no effing business being at Sports Illustrated. I don't know how to play anything. I was supposed to get a job at People. Now that I could have done, although there's a kind of horror day in, day out. My friends that I knew at People magazine said, you eventually just are so weary trying to turn stars and athletes' ridiculous cliched statements into conversation. You basically writing their lines for them, you know, trying to lead them to say what you want them to say. I said, yeah, well, Sports Illustrated had some of that too. But I thought I was going to get a job at People, and then the job I was up for, someone's nephew from the chairman of the board's nephew was put there, and I was deprived of it. And the woman who was going to hire me, the articles editor at People, was so pissed that this was the era, this is, you guys, again, before your time, there was Dynasty. You must have seen clips of Dominique Devereaux and Alex Carrington. Right? Well, they all had male assistants. That was the fashion in about 1989, is that women executives had male secretaries. That was actually new once upon a time. And so, you don't look at me now. I mean, think of me at 21. I was a lot thinner and had a fetching kind of Mediterranean curls in my hair. Anyway, so I was a great assistant, and she really wanted me and not the nephew. So anyway, she called. She was having an affair with the football editor at Sports Illustrated. And I had arranged, every afternoon I would arrange them to go next door to the Sheraton. The Sheraton, it was called the Sheraton Centre, C-E-N-T-R-A. I don't know why Midtown Manhattan. Couldn't be the Sheraton Center. Sheraton, and we all called it the Centre. Tried to outdo each other with French accent. And they had a regular room, and I would book it under my name so they wouldn't get caught by their respective spouses. Hey, it's New York. You know, it's what you do when you're on your way up. And anyway, so she called the football editor and said, you got anything at Sports Illustrated? And they did. They had an administrative assistant position. So I went in there and I worked for one of the most fearsome. When I saw The Devil Wears Prada, I thought, this is not based on Anna Wintour. It's based on, I won't say her name, at Sports Illustrated. She's the hardest boss I have ever worked for. Nothing suited her, nothing. But I survived. And I started freelancing pieces, profile pieces, because I don't know anything about sports. I can't be sent anywhere to report on sports. I don't know what I'm looking at. But I can do a profile piece. And I did a bunch of them, and they got accepted in the magazine. They said, why don't you just come be a reporter? And I thought the gig is gonna be up at some point, right? I'm gonna be sitting around with these wonderful people who breathe and dream sports, and they're gonna say something about, a Babe Ruth-like figure, and I will not have heard of them, it's gonna be, it's gonna be bad. So I looked over the materials, and it said that they would hold your position if you went to grad school. It was a very progressive company in those days. This is the late 80s. They had, paternity leave and maternity leave. They were like, before their time. So I said, so let me get this straight. I can go get a master's somewhere, and you guys will hold this open for me? And they said, yeah. I said, okay, I'll go get a master's. And but then I realized I had to take the GRE. I'm not a great test taker. So someone rather offhandedly say, well, why don't you go to Oxford or Cambridge then? I don't think you have to take the GRE for a foreign school. So yeah, that sounds good. So I applied to Oxford, and damn if I didn't get in. It's the same way with the Sports Illustrated. I just kept finding myself places I had no business being. But that's a good thing. I recommend all of you when you're, as you proceed with your 20s and 30s, to have a few completely improbable adventures and see what kind of life you get as a result of those improbable adventures. Because when you're my age, you don't want any adventures. You want the mortgage paid, and you want to get home to see Monday Night Football or whatever. But any other? I'm actually so nearsighted I can barely just speak up. Yeah.
I know that you taught creative writing or fiction writing at NC State. Did writing a novel make it easier? Write novels make it easier to teach creative writing or make it harder?
Well, if any of you publish a novel, there will be opportunities for you to join a creative writing department, and that's a credential that's hard to get around. And by the time I got to State, I'd written 3. And it also occurred to me, although the year a novel comes out, you get money, and the year that you sell it, you get money, and I didn't have to work. But boy, in between the novels, I didn't have any money. So I thought, well, I'll do what you do. I'll go teach. And I did. I taught at Irvine, which was a big MFA program, and Caltech, that's the Big Bang Theory school. Those are the smartest kids I ever taught. It's terrifying. My first class session would be spent making them think I knew something, because it was a matter of time before they would realize that they had an IQ, way down the road from mine. And we're also at Warren Wilson College. I went all over. And then finally, they said they were starting an MFA program at State. Well, my dad went to State. My family's in North Carolina. I said, well, okay, I'll troop the colors. I'll say, I'll talk about my dear old dad and my uncle who taught history at State. And I'll get the job, then I'll move on after a little bit. But I really liked the MFA program that we came up with. And I think I'm up to, particularly the poets, we've just been on fire with the poets, but we have so many graduates that are out there working and teaching themselves, and we have published people, we have people in publishing. I think about 20 novelists that have worked with me have gone on to all degree of success and not success. I mean, it's everything. But I really like the MFA world. And I guess after I had a bestseller with, the 4th book, I could have just quit. But I actually like the writing workshop world and being around colleagues and talking about writing and no one thinking I'm strange. Well, they think I'm strange, but it's not strange to go on at great length about where the comma goes in that sentence. That's the kind of world I want to live in. And so that's pretty much MFA land, or creative writing department land. Yeah, way back there.
Where were you at in around 2008 when the market had that?
That's a good question. Do I remember? Oh, I was already at Oxford. I was working on my master's at Oxford University. No, let me think about that. That's, I don't know where I was. I think I was probably still bumming around waiting for one of these jobs to come through. But you know what? I think that was the year I did work at NC State before it was made official. Yeah, so I was around. How many people weren't even around in 2008? Show of hands, just how young everybody is. Oh, okay. So you were vaguely affected by the complete bottoming out of the U.S. financial world. Yeah. Oh. As I said, I'm so nearsighted. I just ask.
What kept you motivated for your writing career, and who is your favorite author?
Oh, well, I can't pick a favorite author. There's a whole bunch. What motivated me is I can't honestly answer that, because if you'd asked me all the way back to first grade, I would have said, oh, I'm going to be a writer one day. I don't know what got that started. I remember I would take that, you know, that paper you get in elementary school that has the big blue lines and then a dotted blue line. It's on newsprint or whatever. I would take that and I'd fold it over and fold it over and fold it over until I had, you know, a big 50-page book. And on the front of it, I would write something in kid handwriting, some title by Wilton Barnhardt, you know. So, and that I didn't feel that anything had to be inside the book, but the title was very important. Some critics would say I've kept that up, that I've kept up that, but no, I don't know why. It always struck me as what I wanted to do. I was a very verbal kid, loved words. The only thing I was any good at in school was English, so maybe that was some of it. There was probably nowhere else for me to go. Thanks for that question. Yeah.
When creating characters, do you reference actual people and experiences, or do you find that you channel emotions and figures?
I think, yeah, that's a great question.
Please paraphrase the question a little bit.
Oh, yes, of course, about where the creation of the characters, are they based on real people? Every once in a while, I just put somebody directly in, you know, but if I don't think there's a lawsuit possibility. And, but mostly, all the characters are a little bit me. You know, these are people I've perhaps met, but I'll adjust them, and I think, well, what would you think if you were in that circumstance? So a lot of them are me. I'll tell you a story. In Emma Who Saved My Life, my agent, who I've stayed with for 30-some years, he was an actor once. And Emma Who Saved My Life is about a young actor moving to New York City and trying to make it. It's set in the 70s and 80s, which is sort of before my time there. But and there was I had a friend who worked for this horrible monster of an agent, loud, crude. I thought she was just monstrous. And she was my stereotype of this, you know, barracuda, driving horrible deals, cursing people out on the phone. And so I would go to see my friend who worked there, and you know, for lunch hour. Don't take too long for lunch. I gotta do so-and-so this afternoon. Who left my cottage cheese out from the refrigerator? She was always yelling something. She's horrible. Anyway, I put her directly into the book. At one point, Gil, the hero, has that agent. And of course I changed the name. And the book the deal has been made, the contract's been signed. One day I'm sitting with my agent, the former actor, and he says, you know, I love that character. You couldn't possibly know this, but there's an agent in town that I stayed with for about 6 weeks. I couldn't take it anymore. Name is, I'm going to make it up, you know, Jane Davis. And I must have lost all the blood in my face. I went, yeah, that's who that's based on. And he looked at me and he said, you have got to change that. If I could pick that out, then someone else can too. So I totally wrote her background and her name and tried to disguise everything. So that taught me not to put real people in the book. Most everybody else is a variation on people I know filtered through me. Is that a hand? I cannot see anything. I'm sorry. I'm blind. Yeah.
Did Louis teaching that aid help you with writing the book? With your experience with Louis in 2008, help you with writing this book?
The question was the disaster of 2008 informative for the book? I needed financial, I mean, I had the idea of a family running out of money and then turning on each other as the money got less and less. And boy, Roberto and Rachel, they don't seem to get along well anyway, but they really don't get along by the end of the book as they are trying to cheat each other out of things. And I needed that, but nothing, that was the last financial collapse. So I just took it because it was recent, it was the last financial disaster. It's one of the disasters in which companies went down, investment banking. Lehman Brothers had been around, 150 years? It was like they built Wall Street around the place, and it went down. So that's what I needed. I just used 2008, but I didn't really have any real feelings about 2008, except it was a big, colossal flop of our financial world. That may be it, but oh yes.
You mentioned earlier that most authors weren't like very mathematical. Really don't make much money. How would you recommend trying to get into the field because of that?
One more time, I almost got it.
You mentioned that unless you're one of the like very top authors, people like Stephen King, you don't really make much money. Because of that, how would you recommend trying to get into the field?
Oh, I say, you never know. And I'm sure, early, there are a lot of people who are now big best-selling authors who never thought it was going to happen, and you never know when you're going to hit. I'm a big Ann Tyler fan. She didn't have a success till her 10th novel. She's from here, from Raleigh, I believe, by the way. So you never know when it's going to hit. I know that I'm going to be exceedingly famous. I'm going to make movies out of every single book I've ever written after I die. And the money will go to my good-for-nothing nieces and nephews. Maybe. I'll leave it to Wake Tech. That's what I'll do. So, I mean, if you're doing it to cash in, you might examine your motivations for why you're writing. It's such a lot of effort. I mean, I know there are people who say, I wrote this book in 8 weeks, but generally if you take any care with it and your name is on it, it's going to take a year or more at minimum to write a good book. And once you put in that kind of time, you really would like to have a pretty good deal, but you're probably not doing it for riches. It's nice if you can get them. And it's not a bad, I mean, it's like if you have a teaching job or you work anywhere else, it's great money on top of that job. And again, remember the write-off business. So there's a lot to be said for it, even if you're not super rich. Yeah?
Are you inspired at all by the present political situation to write another book?
This is a great question, which is about how much do you feel compelled to rage against the current political scene? The problem is the world is full of books. I love Victorian novels, and you can find Victorian novels where, it's Gladstone versus Disraeli, or they're raging about a particular act that didn't pass. If Mark Twain had written a book with his outrage about that Chester Arthur didn't get the nomination from his own party after being president, you would not read that book. And I have a feeling that all of our politics will look petty and small, as years go on. So you have to be careful. I mean, you have to notice it because you live in a world in which it's going to make a great difference to our national life if Trump wins or if Biden wins. But at the same time, we've all read books in which they just went on too long. And if you want to write an essay, write an essay. You want to write a screed, write a letter to the editor. But maybe fiction ought to be a little more, it's interesting that almost none of the great American authors until way after the Civil War wrote about the Civil War. Virginia Woolf makes a point somewhere. She says World War I almost doesn't exist. If you look at Forster and Woolf and Benson and all the writers at the time. Now there was poetry being written, but it took years afterwards before it came out. So many times you have to have a filter of a few years to see if what the good stuff is. But yeah, no, I take some pot shots at Bush and Trump in this. Yeah.
It seems that North Carolina has a lot of writers,
I am trying to put together an anthology of, I mean, I don't have any time, but UNC Press was interested. You know, at State, we have a state literary contest, a fiction contest in the fall, we have a poetry contest in the spring. And you go down the list of who won when, and you see Marilyn Mayhew Bergman, and Amy Knox Brown, Teresa Ann Fowler. You see people who have gone, Tyree Day, Leila Chati. You see people who have gone on to publish and be printed, published authors. And I don't know why we are so smart and wonderful when it comes to. I think the only state that we're in competition with maybe for that prize is Mississippi, and they've had their day. That's a while back, but we are still flourishing, I think. And I'd like to think it's because we are maybe not the most redneck, uneducated state in the South, although we're obviously bucking for that prize, I think. But there was, I mean, no, I grew up with, Terry Sanford's Department of Education, the Research Triangle, the Governor's School. There really was an effort made among a certain generation to be at the smart southern state. And all that's fading away. Well, I know that I have detained you from thinking about spring break, which is right around the corner. I hope I've entertained you a little bit to stop you thinking about spring break. Hope you have a good one. Thank you. Apparently this is still alive. So.
Oh, is it?
Guys, if you haven't signed up, we'll have a sign sheet in just a moment outside for you, okay? Thank you again for attending.
What a great crowd. If we could have had a crowd like this for some of our writers, we would not have been embarrassed. This was absolutely... Yeah, smart questions. Good. People paid attention. Hey there.
So nice to hear you. You're my first call. Usually,
I'm going to sit here.
usually, I'm a student here.
Yeah.
Art student. I'm 80. So
80.